Ms. Nguyen, when did you start in your position?
I started with,
Can you hit the record? Yeah.
sorry. I started with NASA on July 13 in 2015, and I became the I started as the Deputy CIO, and I became the Chief Information Officer at the end of September of 2015.
Gotcha. So, if my math is correct, about a year?
Yeah,
A little bit under?
just slightly over a year, going towards 14 months.
Gotcha. So I guess we're in November now, huh? There's been plenty of reports about how over the summer the NASA's the Agency Consolidated End User Service, or do you call it ACES? Yeah. Was operating under a conditional authority to operate since July 24th. My understanding is that you declined to sign off on the authority to operate for ACES because of a difference of opinion between your office and the contractor operating the system. That it was the issue was over patching, it seems like. Now, I think this is actually a good news story, right? Because you obviously felt you had the authorities to do those kinds of things, and you're using your technical judgment. Can you walk us through the thought process during that decision?
Yes,
My
I
friend,
can.
yield just for a second.
Sure.
Forgive me, but I have a hearing upstairs, but I didn't want to miss this. I just asked unanimous consent my opening statement be entered into the record. Forgive me, I got to go back upstairs to another hearing on the census, but someday, hopefully, the good Lord will give me the gift of bilocation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection. Thank you. Ms. Nguyen.
NASA will get to work on that bilocation. Yes, so yes, the authority to operate for our end user services, we have several of them. It's a very complex set of systems. The one in particular had to do with the client-based devices that we use, computers and that. And it was presented to me on July 25th. The presentation is on the security risks and how those risks were to be mitigated, and upon that, I ask if they can look me in the eye and say free and clearly they would recommend signature. And on that date, they presented to me the package as we usually go through, and at that point, both on the operational side as well as the gentleman who was brought in for security to serve as the acting CISO, as our acting CISO was on vacation, on the operational side, said that they could not recommend to me signature because we had a discrepancy on numbers of devices as well as the status of the patches and how quickly they were being deployed and the status of that deployment. So it's both the timing and effort. And the gentleman who was acting as the acting CISO for me at the time said that he also could not agree to could not recommend signature for the authority to operate. And so I asked a series of questions. What does that really mean? And in this instance, we didn't have enough data to make a sufficient risk determination on whether the ATO should be signed or not. And so at that point, I said that I would not sign and that work needed to be done on the side of both NASA as well as HPES to get the work done. By that Friday, so this was a Monday, by that Friday I had signed the authority to operate because we were able to see and understand the risks that I would be signing off on.
So did that give anyone at NASA heartburn? Did you receive any flack for not signing off on an ATO? Because if I remember correctly, the news coverage at the time, I think the term was unprecedented step. And I imagine that CIO letting a major system authorization to operate expire turned some heads.
Yes, Chairman, it did turn some heads. So the actions, right, when one does this action, news of this significance would spread fast. So I made sure that the Chief Information Security Officers around our centers, as well as our Chief Information Officers around the centers, were aware of my decision. And then my next step was to inform the administrator and the deputy administrator of the action that I had taken, as well as letting our press office know as well. We figured that there would be this would leak out and become information in headlines. And so I was supported by everybody for making this decision, and I would do it again. I wish that we hadn't ever reached that point, and so we worked on some prevention effort. HPES has definitely stepped up to the plate in terms of working with us. And they and my team have actually responded very positively that the authorities to operate, as you said, are not to be rubber stamped. Absolutely. If my signature is on that and there would have been a breach the next day, then it would be very obvious that I would not have done the job that I was asked to do on behalf of the NASA as well as of the federal government.
Well, I'd like to commend you on making a tough decision, and these are the kinds of decisions that we want to see more CIOs making. That's the whole reason we're empowering you to make these types of decisions. So I'd like to get into a procurement question a little here, and so if a system doesn't get the approved ATO, how does that work? You know, do you have the authority to change, move? Does that void the contract? How does that, can you give me some insight onto that process?
NASA's procurement for an information system has the security requirements, the federal security requirements in that. We would need to work on procurement clauses, and I think these would need to be broad federal government clauses in terms of ramifications of an authority to operate and what would happen after that. The CIO, in concert with the rest of the agency, would need to be able to work out whether that system needed to be shut down and modernized or upgraded, or, because not every system is the same, others are not in a clean position to say, okay, we just can't do this anymore and go that. So we would need some flexibilities to make those determinations, but I believe that procurement clauses would need to be added for the benefit of the federal government.
So am I understanding your statement correct? You would like to have that authority?
I would like to have that authority.
Mr. Album, do you have any opinions on this topic, on ATOs and budget authorities and things?
Sure. Thank you, sir. In the year or so that I've been the USDA CIO, I have not been in a situation where I've had to disapprove an ATO or not sign. However, similar to Ms. Nguyen, I see within the U.S. Department of Agriculture the support to make the right decisions. We have a enterprise IT board that is composed of our undersecretaries, chaired by the deputy secretary, where we can bring challenging IT decisions before that board and have a robust conversation. So we've done that. Not on an ATO, however. On the point regarding procurements, having that contract language, I think, would be very good, and I agree that it would need to be something that's government-wide. We'd have to understand how that works, because oftentimes with the establishment of an ATO, there's a component that is the contractor's required to do. There's a component that the federal staff has to do. So having good, very clear roles and responsibilities and very clear timelines would be critical. Procurement language, contract language would definitely help.
Mr. Klopp, any opinions on this?
Actually, we had a very similar situation to the NASA situation, where we had a very large contractor who was running our call center and how was not compliant. We took a little bit different approach, which is that we revoked the permanent ATO and provided them with a provisional ATO that extended for 90 days and then continued to extend that and put pressure on them, threatening the unprecedented move that Renee went to, but never actually pulling the trigger on it. In the end, it took us about a year to get that system completely compliant, but the pressure and threat of pulling the ATO is what allowed us to do it. So I would I would certainly agree if we were able to have the kind of some sort of legal wording in there that forced vendors to do this as one more lever on top of them, that would be really valuable for us.
Because I would even take it a step further. In the MGT bill, when we get that past the Senate, I hope you're listening. This is an opportunity, because if you had to change, if you had to move in a different direction, I would consider that savings. right? That if some project had to stop, I would consider that savings and would be able to go into the working capital fund that you would continue to have access to for 3 years, right? So that is an additional tool so that you're not having to run against the clock. And I think what most people don't recognize is that your systems, your networks are so big, and there's so many devices on it that changing a system in the course of a year is next to impossible. And that's why you need the additional flexibilities with those resources. And so that would be the next logical continuation of this topic. Ms. Nguyen, the ACES, is it currently operating on a conditional, or has it gotten a standard ATO?
Our ACES contract is on a ATO that, like Rob was talking about, that's running on an 18-month time frame. So, and we've got regular meetings on both the ATO as well as making sure that our teams, NASA and HPES, are working together to ensure that the next ATO is either longer or has the right time frame for checks and balances.
And Mr. Album, am I to infer from your statements that USDA does not currently have any systems operating without an ATO?
No, that's not correct. There are some systems that don't have an ATO. USDA has employed an ongoing assessment process, and we assess 1/3 of all of the controls of each system. We have 329 systems annually. So it is possible during the assessment of those controls, we'll find something that requires us to revoke an ATO and work with an agency to get back into compliance. So the number of systems we have and the number of systems that have a valid ATO is in flux because of this process. So again, to your point, I think it's a good thing if we find something that says we're not going to have an ATO for the system right now. We're going to work to correct it.
Gotcha. Thank you.